secondly, Buffalo scores with 13 seconds left. I mean, you still have time to get field goal, but it looks pretty grim there. You have any special advice to Pat right there? Do you have any words for him at that point when Buffalo took the lead for the last time?
Yeah, when it's grim, be the Grim Reaper and go get it. So he did that. He made everybody around him better, which he is great at, and he just does it effortlessly. When it gets tough, he's going to be there battling, and players appreciate that.
My goodness, go be the Grim Reaper. This is Herbie Teope with the Kansas City Star. Welcome to Sports Beat Live Postgame Edition, brought to you by the University of Kansas Healthcare System. I am joined by my colleagues, columnist Vahe Gregorian. How you doing, Vahe?
I'm processing, Herbie.
I think we're all processing. Sam McDowell, my beat partner, joins us. What's going on, Sam, my man?
A lot is going on.
A lot is going on, and I'm sure Lila Bromberg will also say the same thing. Welcome to the show, Lila. What's going on?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Been a wild night.
Wild, epic, whatever adjective you can think of. We can call this the 13-second game. We can call this the Grim Reaper game. However you slice and dice it, it was a wild Chiefs 42-36 win in overtime over the Buffalo Bills, and we will break this down for you. Look, 25 points in the last quarter alone, and this game goes into overtime. So much happening, so much going on in our minds. Vahe, why don't you kick it off, because we need to have the columnist point of view. What's going through your head in this game?
Well, as we were joking in the press box, it was one of those nights to trot out the old time-honored "or so it seemed" as your transitions in the early copy of your game story, Herbie. There were a lot of twists and turns. I do think this. I think even though all of us were still kind of stunned at how this actually played out, I also don't think any of us ever really quite thought, well, it's absolutely over. I think Sam McDowell, we were kind of joking, like they left too much time with 13 seconds from Mahomes. And one pass later, that 19-yarder, I think, to Tyreek Hill, you realized all he needs another decent gain. And they had all their timeouts left. So it's funny, but to flip it even another dimension, I think there are people that thought the Chiefs had it won when they went ahead, whatever that was, 154 left. I mean, it was 25 points in the last 154, I think. So I know it's hard to deal with recency bias when you're still in the moment. I know we're all wondering, like, do we think we just saw the greatest playoff game ever? I think there's a case for it, but I think you'd have to really study it if you want to make an honest comparison with things over the years. But I know we can say this. Nobody that was here will ever forget this game.
Sam, take it away there. You did make that comment in there. I remember it's 13 seconds too much time. Is that enough time for Patrick Mahomes? And clearly it was. But, what was going through your head as you're watching them getting field goal range, 44 yards and actually 10 seconds because it was 3 seconds left to kick the field goal, Harrison Butker. But what's going through your head as you're watching this as it plays out?
Well, I think Vahe summarized it well, but to speak to just how incredible this game was, you could take away maybe 3 or 4 of the best layers of this game, and we'd still have a really good football game. But what stands out the most for sure is Patrick Mahomes, 13 seconds left on the clock. He's got to drive. I think we estimated at least 35 yards to get in reasonable field goal range to where you're going to trot out the kicker and not throw a Hail Mary. And it really genuinely seems like on that sideline, it was no big deal. Like they actually thought that was more of a possibility. To where all of us, we're riding as if Buffalo has won this game with 13 seconds left. The Buffalo sideline was absolutely celebrating like they had won this game. And obviously you're going to be excited about a touchdown to go ahead. I'm not saying that they thought it was over, but it sure seemed like they thought they were going to the AFC Championship. And so it's just one latest reminder that this team has Patrick Mahomes and the rest of the league does not. And I guess what really speaks to the incredibleness of it is that with 13 seconds left and Patrick Mahomes has to get his team in field goal range, the game was not over. But yet when he gets the ball and has to score a touchdown in overtime, you knew it was over. So I just think that, like I said, it's one more example of how incredible this quarterback is.
Lila, your quick thoughts here as well, because you had an opportunity to really absorb that last 4 or 5 minutes of regulation and most of overtime. While Sam and I were scrambling in the background, rewriting and writing and rewriting. What was your take on what you just witnessed? Because sports, obviously, this was an epic game, but from your point of view as a sports writer, what was your take?
Yeah, I think very similar to what Sam said. I think it just speaks volumes that you have one sideline celebrating with 13 seconds left, whereas, the Chiefs, Andy Reid said after the game, one thing he loves about his team is that, they don't flinch and, how everyone was confident. And I think that just kind of speaks to where, the Chiefs are as a team, as to, like Sam said, as to having a quarterback like Patrick Mahomes. And I think that was a huge takeaway from this game, is just how many special moments that his team can produce, how many incredible plays, and just make it look so easy. We saw throughout the night, and then obviously at the time that it mattered most in the game, they really needed to put up some points.
And, when you talk about mattering the most, Tyreek Hill, obviously with a monster game, that 64-yard touchdown, then, we thought the Chiefs were going to win it. Then obviously all the roller coaster stuff started happening, but the guy finished with 11 catches, 150-plus yards, and that touchdown. The Bills, for the most part, I think we're still going back to playing two safeties back, and then all of a sudden it came back to bite them because they started hitting Tyreek Hill underneath. That 60-plus yard touchdown was a short pass, and then he had the speed to outrun the Bills. Sam, you've written extensively a lot about why teams were playing back. This came back to haunt the Bills tonight, didn't it?
Well, so the Bills actually cycled through some different things tonight. They started with the too high looks, but we're running a lot of the what I call in today's paper the robber or thief defense, where one of the safeties comes and cuts off a route. But when you bring a safety to cut off a route, he tends to play man-to-man on a double team, and they were doing that with Travis Kelce and or Tyreek Hill a lot. So Patrick Mahomes recognized that. I think that's the defense he was expecting going into the game, and that's why you saw so many scrambles. Because when you play that zone coverage, except for you have the robber defense, it leaves open running lanes. Once the Chiefs proved they could do that, and they were running the ball very effectively with Edwards-Helaire and McKinnon, but mostly Edwards-Helaire, they switched to a lot of man-to-man late. And you don't want to play man-to-man against Tyreek Hill, especially in the open field. And that's why you saw that touchdown late in the game.
Vahe, we've seen go ahead. You're getting ready to say something. Go ahead.
Oh, I just Sam made me think of something. I had kind of joked the other day that the difference in this game would be who rushed for more yardage, Mahomes or Josh Allen. It was 69-68, and that's not really the case. Although there were ways that those wrinkles were part of how we got to where it all ended up. So nothing, Herbie. You can steer me where you want me. I need to be led on a line of questioning.
Well, but you're right, Vahe, about that was a really key play or aspect of this game for 4 quarters, at least until that final 13 seconds. The Chiefs had 2 opportunities to put their defense was twice on the field with the chance to win the game. 2 drives where if they get a stop, they win the game. And on the first opportunity, they had the Bills with 4th down. And Melvin Ingram absolutely had Josh Allen within his grasp, to where I thought that could be a play that Melvin Ingram is thinking about for the rest of his career, that he could not bring down Josh Allen there. And then Turk Wharton leaps in after him, and then Frank Clark is chasing him down, and none of them get to Josh Allen because of his mobility. Josh Allen's mobility was absolutely a factor in this game. We saw it twice on 4th down. We saw, I think, 3 conversions on 3rd down. So, and obviously the whole first drive for the Chiefs was Patrick Mahomes and his scrambling abilities. So, major component of this game. It's one of those layers I'm talking about that's get completely lost because of just the frantic 2 minutes in overtime.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the frantic 2 minutes in overtime. Go ahead, Vahe. Sorry, I would cut you off again.
No, I was just mostly speaking to make sure that whoever's coming in the room knew there was somebody in here.
Hey, we saw someone. I heard someone open up Sam's door, and Sam shot him the ushka look, so he quietly closed the door behind him. But you mentioned Mahomes. Okay, the Grim Reaper. That's to me that's probably like the greatest quote that we've heard from Andy Reid maybe over the last year, 2 years. Why is Patrick Mahomes a Grim Reaper, Vahe?
He's cold. I mean, he is cold-blooded. It's really true, the stuff people say. I mean, sometimes it doesn't work out, right? But the reason you can do those things that he did in the last 13 seconds is because he really didn't panic. I mean, people say that all the time, but we have seen this in innumerable ways, right? There are 1,643 different ways you can describe what makes him special, and whether it's the resilience, the imagination. I saw our friend Dan Wetzel at Yahoo made a point today on Twitter about that he's playing basketball and football on every play, and baseball is probably his best sport. There's so much going on with Patrick. It's really interesting. But in the end, Patrick is just indomitable will. And I think it would be really easy to just assume that 13 seconds left, you got to do a couple of Hail Marys. I was looking for that Tyreek Hail Mary thing they did at Dallas a few years ago, but that would have botched it. I mean, they would have been tackled and wouldn't have gotten what they wanted. So I don't know, those two plays, that pass to Kelsey to set up the field goal. I mean, it's a guy like no other.
I think, well, first of all, somebody is pointing out that Herbie and I picked the Bills. My first comment was that this was my first comment, and Vahe's already heard this once, but I'm going to say it again. My first comment was that this was a coin flip game, and I was at least correct about that. A coin flip decided this game. But to the Patrick Mahomes question, he's got a mentality that certain things bring out the best in him. And these types of situations are one of them. When his back against the wall, you see nobody better in this sport. But another thing is when a team beats him, you see his very best against him the next time. And the other interesting dynamic of this game in particular is this Bills team has been built to beat the Chiefs, and specifically to beat Patrick Mahomes. Their secondary, they added a bunch of speed. They prioritized the cornerbacks and the safeties, and it's all to counter what the Chiefs did. As much as the Chiefs last year said, hey, the offensive line cost us the Super Bowl, let's go out and fix our offensive line. The Bills said, the Chiefs are the team that's beating us. They're the Chiefs that's the team standing in our way. What can we do to counter that? They did it all in the offseason. That they had the best sort of makeup of this blueprint to beat this team. And they did it to Mahomes in week 5, and he just absolutely shredded him today. And we all know this guy well enough to know, I think there's nothing that gives him greater joy than hearing that something has shut him down in some way, and he finds a way to have a game like he had tonight.
And to add one point on Mahomes, we mentioned that first drive of the game and his rushing on that stood out. He had so many incredible plays in this game, but that play for, the touchdown there where he, steps back on 3rd and 5, doesn't see anything he likes, hesitates, and just, easily finds that hole and dives in to get the touchdown. That was another play that just stood out to me where he was just getting it done any way he wanted to tonight.
One other last quick thing. I don't know why I feel I need to mention this, but it really stood out on that drive too. That 3rd and 6 play early, Buffalo just stormed down the field. It's 7-0. And Patrick, it's another one of those plays, to Sam's point, we're not even going to be thinking about this play because there were 75 other plays that probably will stay with us more. But I don't know how he got out of getting hit. He got outside. He flipped the ball to McKinnon, first down. If they punt there, I'm not sure how that first half plays out. But I think the way Buffalo was playing and it just psychologically, instead it's 7-7 and sort of resets.
Yeah, you're right. And I think when you look at this game, the Chiefs did not repeat a lot of the same mistakes or some of the mistakes that beat them back in week 5. Patrick Mahomes, that game had 3 turnovers, 2 interceptions, a lost fumble, 0 turnovers today. Byron Pringle lost a fumble. Well, Pringle scored a touchdown, and where did he go to school, Vahe? Just wondering if you knew this.
I can't remember.
K-State, baby, went to K-State. Byron Pringle went to K-State. Look, the Chiefs recorded no sacks in that first game. They only had one quarterback hit recorded by Mike Dana. They had 2 sacks today on Josh Allen. So a lot of the mistakes that they committed back in week 5, and just like Sam was saying earlier, they learn from them, and you don't see a repeat of it. But to me, there are so many other different things going on in this game as well. We mentioned the Grim Reaper aspect. We mentioned Mahomes' ability to run. But what about that defense? Okay, yes, the score was a little ridiculous, but what about this defense stood out to you? And I'm going to kick this to you, Lila, because you're writing a story about this guy.
Yeah, I wrote about Nick Bolton, who I think has, stood out just throughout, the season as a rookie, led the team, with 112 combined tackles. No other player had more than 80 on the season. And then tonight, in the second quarter and the third quarter, he had two huge, plays on third down to then force punts. After each of those plays, the Chiefs then went on a drive to score touchdowns, which, was huge. Another, play that really stood out to me. And I don't remember, what quarter it was in the game, but you had that big play from Melvin Ingram where, he gets a sack. It's a near fumble, kind of bounces off of a couple defenders' bodies and then ends in another punt. There are a bunch of plays, I think both those were in the first half, of just plays in that first half where the Chiefs really did force key third down stops.
Herbie, what you mentioned, the pass rush, I mean, both of those sacks came on third downs. They both ended drives. Both of the plays that Lila's referencing ended drives. They forced punts. But it's really hard not to consider what happened in the last 5 minutes defensively and what the Chiefs are going to be facing. What's so crazy about this game is we haven't even said that they're facing the Bengals in the AFC Championship game. This feels like a game that should have gotten to the Super Bowl. And I thought going into the game, I mean, we've said this on this week's show, that these were the best two teams in the NFL. And you sort of get caught up in – I always come back to this reference of the 1980 U.S. men's hockey team when they beat Russia. Oh, by the way, you still got another game to win the gold medal. That's what this game feels like to me, is that it's just this instant classic of a game. I think they have faced the toughest competition they're going to face in these playoffs, but you still have to beat what's ahead of you. And the defense that showed up for the last 5 minutes, it is a little worrisome because they were given the opportunity to win the football game. And they instead said, we're going to ask you to do even more, 15. I mean, as much, he had a go-ahead drive, a game-tying drive, and then a game-winning drive. And the defense could have stopped those things from happening. So I do think, as well as they played pretty well for 3 quarters. But backs against the wall, giving up those points, they're going to face a lot of those situations next week against Cincinnati.
Hey, Sam, by the way, it's just really funny that you mentioned that the 1980 hockey game. Because I was thinking a little bit about some elements of this game, conjuring the "Do you believe in miracles" call, as well as the Kirk Gibson "I can't believe what I just saw" call. That's what this game was. It was all that. But a great point to be reminding us that needed to win another game. And in Chiefs' case, of course, you need to win 2 more.
Vahe, what's more impressive, that Sam actually knew that 1980 reference, or he actually brought it up?
I like to say great minds think alike, and so do ours. So,
I actually referenced that.
We're men of a
game
certain
in a
age, so we grew up with that. So I was actually, when Sam brought that up, I was like, wow, okay, Sam, go on with your bad self. Hey, we're going to take a quick break here. We hear from our sponsors, University of Kansas Health System. We'll continue after this break.
March 4th, 2015, I got out of the shower and felt a lump in my left breast.
We were able to quickly uncover that she had 2 subtypes of breast cancer, each of them requiring separate and unique treatment plans. This is why you come to the University of Kansas Cancer Center.
It is critical to be treated by a team of experts in that specific cancer type.
If you don't start with us, I think you'll have more questions than answers.
Why would you go anywhere else?
Welcome back to SportsBeat Live, brought to you by the University of Kansas Health System. I'm joined by Vahe Gregorian, Sam McDowell, and Lila Bromberg as we continue discussion on the epic Chiefs 42-36 win over the Buffalo Bills at Arrowhead Stadium. Shock and awe, obviously. I think we're still, here we are almost an hour and a half after the game, and we're still sort of absorbing everything that's going on here. I'm going to point out a couple of things here because, the Chiefs do have to play another game, as Sam mentioned, and it is against the Cincinnati Bengals. Davis, their wide receiver over there for Buffalo, had 8 catches, 201 yards, 4 touchdowns on 10 targets. Sam, what's that stat line remind you of?
Yeah, I mean they're facing obviously a better receiving trio than they faced this week, and I mean Buffalo's got a great receiving duo with Diggs and Gabriel Davis, but Jamar Chase I think is as good as anybody in the NFL, and the Chiefs saw that firsthand. What was alarming though is just how open Davis was on a lot of those touchdowns. You know, the first go-ahead score, he just absolutely juked the crap out of Mike Hughes. But a couple of other plays, he's wide open over the middle. He toasted Juan Thornhill on a cover 2, and Juan Thornhill is probably the fastest guy, and that the Chiefs have at safety. But I wondered how many of those were a result, and if, not to sound too coach-like, you have to go back and watch the film, but I wonder how much those are a result of missing Tyrann Mathieu for this game's entirety. And an interesting note to point out, Herbie, and I don't know if you caught it differently, but we usually get injury updates from Andy Reid after the game, and I don't recall hearing anything about Tyrann Mathieu other than what we got mid-game, which is we know he went into the concussion protocol and he didn't return.
Yeah, and that's going to be a situation to watch very closely as the Chiefs return to practice this week, because he's going to have to receive medical clearance before he's able to clear that concussion protocol and be available for next AFC Championship game, which is going to be held at Arrowhead Stadium against the Cincinnati Bengals. But Matthew's situation is going to be critical, because you're right. Without him back there, you just got Juan Thornhill, and the Chiefs. We saw a lot of Armani Watts back there. We saw a lot of Daniel Sorensen back there. Mike Hughes looked kind of lost. He fell down at least twice on 2 touchdowns. Vahe, when you look at this game, how soon does it take for a team to come off of a high like this and prepare for the Bengals? Because here's now the right to go to the Super Bowl.
Well, I think I can't remember if you said this or Sam or Lila said this earlier, but one thing, I think this is true. This game, the way it played out and what we all sort of anticipated coming in, that a little bit of the hype was that this is the real Super Bowl. I mean, I don't quite buy that, but I mean, I get the point. And I do think there is. I know they're all pros and these guys are winners, but I do think there's a little potential for some emotional letdown, a little bit of, being drained. But that's what the rest of the week is for, to kind of get back to that state of mind. But I do think that's the kind of thing that there could be a little anticlimactic kind of hangover from this after a game of this magnitude. And but I think more to the point will be whether things happen like Tyrann Mathieu is back and a few things like that. I would suspect that the Chiefs will work through whatever emotions they are still clinging with after they can't sleep tonight.
Here's the thing to think about. You remember back in week 1, Tyrann Mathieu didn't play because he was on the COVID protocol, or excuse me, he did clear the COVID protocol, but they decided to keep him out because of conditioning. That secondary looked lost. If he doesn't clear protocol for the game against the Bengals, Sam, what are some of the options you think that they're going to stick with? Because they got to have somebody back there with Juan Thornhill.
Yeah, I mean, we saw, like you said, Armani Watts today, and we saw in base packages, they just replaced him with Daniel Sorensen. And dime packages, they kept Daniel Sorensen close to the line of scrimmage and pushed Armani Watts into the safety role. But, you're in a troublesome spot if Tyrann Mathieu can't go. And, of course, that still is an if. But like you said, he's got to clear that 5-step process by the NFL, which you can do multiple steps in one day. But they don't want to put Daniel Sorensen on the back end. And they did that against the Bengals last time. Jamar Chase burned him on a cover 2 when Daniel Sorensen was in the cover 2. But if he's in your base defense, that's also going to mean if the other option is putting Armani Watts, who just has not had a lot of defensive snaps this year. He's a special teams ace. He's a 4-phase special teams guy, but he does not play in the secondary very often. So do you want to play the experienced guy who lacks speed against a team that has a ton of it? Or do you want to play an inexperienced guy that just hasn't been on the field all that often?
Yeah, and the Chiefs they played this game without cornerback Rashad Fenton, who dealt with a back injury last week, so obviously they were a little thin. Mike Hughes, it looked like late in the game after that time, the second time he fell down, Sam, I think you were the one who pointed it out in the press box. Was that DeAndre Baker we saw out there? And Fenton, or excuse me, Hughes was on the bench, wasn't he?
Yeah, and we see those two guys rotating a little bit in the nickel packages when they move Snead inside and Ward stays outside. We see more of Mike Hughes. And so it was telling that the drive in which the Bills had to score to prolong the game, they went with DeAndre Baker. And I don't think they were choosing Baker as much as they were choosing not to put Hughes back on the field after he'd gotten toasted by Gabriel Davis.
Vahe, when you see a game like this, okay, I want you to think about like this. You've seen a lot of sports in your life. I'm not saying you're old. That's not what I mean. Where you put this game? How high up the list is one of the greatest NFL games you've ever seen?
Well, I think it's easy to feel engulfed in it right now and like, oh, this is, the greatest, right? But I think it would be a more honest answer to have a day or two to kind of step back. I mean, I was speaking to Sam McDowell. I mean, when I started thinking about, great games, great NFL games I've been to, I mean, I think you would say that when the Rams won the Super Bowl against the Titans on a tackle that you couldn't tell if it was going to be made in the end zone or at the one, that was a pretty great game. And there was a lot of, and that's just sort of the one that comes to mind. Or even just think about this for a minute. Yeah, it was a runaway score by the end, but the way the Chiefs came back to beat the 49ers, I mean, so I don't know. We have to come up with a grading system. I don't want to take the emotion out of this. Obviously, you want to just have a gut feeling about what was the greatest thing you ever saw. But I actually think there's different ways to quantify that. But I just think we'll still be. I can only think of a handful of events I've been to, whether I've been fortunate to go to a lot of Olympics and see a lot of stuff in the last 30 years and 35 years, and I can only think of a handful of events that I will have trouble sleeping tonight because I'll still be, 3 hours from now, still be, thinking about it because you just feel the buzz.
Sam, same question to you. Where would you put this?
Yeah, I also remember I agree with Vahe's point. The recency bias makes you say this was the best game you had seen. I do think, in 5 years, we still might say it's this one. The lead changes in the last 2 minutes, and especially the 13 seconds, I think is going to propel it. But, I know Chiefs fans don't want to remember this one, but the 2018 AFC Championship game was incredible. The Chiefs scored 30 points in the second half of that game alone, and they also had a very similar game-tying drive to the one they had tonight. I think there were like 18 seconds left, and Spencer Ware had an incredible catch. They get downfield, and Blair says this all the time, that Harrison Butker's game-tying field goal in that game would be known as one of the best field goals in Chiefs history at the time had they not lost the game in overtime. But the magnitude of that game also being Tom Brady and the Patriots, and also, by the way, that game was going to the Super Bowl, and this one is going to the AFC Championship. So there was a little bit more at stake in that game. So yeah, I mean, but that's what's been fun about this teams in this era, is that they played a lot of these classic games.
Vahe, please go ahead.
I just want to add this, and maybe everybody will disagree or maybe you won't, but a thing that actually made this game less exciting than it might have been is the overtime rule. I mean, if you have an equitable overtime rule, then Josh Allen gets back on the field, and you see what happens there. And, this has been something we've all been quite conscious of since it went the other way against the Chiefs in that Patriots game. You kind of knew Tom Brady was going to take them down and score. Well, wouldn't the more exciting thing be to see what the point counterpoint opportunities are? So in a way, I mean, it's thrilling to go to overtime and what it took to get to overtime, but that was the emotional peak getting to overtime, because I mean, obviously for a Chiefs fan, it's different. They win, and that's the emotional peak. But I think you know what I'm saying. I don't know why the NFL won't look at that rule a little more.
Well, I wonder if the last time this happened, the Chiefs asked the NFL to look at that rule, and I don't know that the Chiefs are going to be asking the NFL to look at that rule again this offseason.
I mean, and you even look at, I was just going to say, I mean, you just look at, college football at that level too. I mean, there's not really both levels of football. There's, so many flaws in how, overtime games work, it kind of makes you wonder if we're ever going to, reach a point where there's an overtime that actually kind of makes sense.
All right, as we get ready to wrap up here in a few minutes here, I'm going to pose this question to you. Okay, we've had the Minneapolis Miracle as a playoff nickname for a memorable game. What would you assign to this game? Vahe, I see you grinning. Well, let's go with you first. What would you assign to this?
I got nothing really that works. I mean, Charm Chiefs, I've been kind of using that a while. It doesn't really hold up. This game deserves a nickname, though. We had a lot of nicknames for all the House of Horrors Chiefs losses here, right? Every one of those games, virtually every one of those games had a little epitaph line. So this game does deserve one. Maybe we need a kansascitystar.com contest. Get some reader engagement on this.
Yeah, look, our readers are chiming in. 13 seconds to glory. Well, what do you think about that one, Sam?
Well, I think Vahe just had the best idea that's going to please our bosses with getting the reader engagement involved here. Let's go with that. I did think at one point we might be calling this the Blake Bell option game, but a lot happened after that play.
Lila, you want to take a shot? Look, you're younger than us. I know you've got that creative mind. What nickname would you assign to this?
I really loved what Andy Reid said about the Grim Reaper. I feel like maybe you can work that in somewhere.
Look, I see someone chiming in there right now. Tyler Hoffman says the Reaper game. Stephen Logan says Michael Myers, because we just wouldn't die. A nice Halloween reference there. Hey, look, we know what's coming up next. The Chiefs get to host a record 4th straight AFC Championship game. Look, nobody else in the NFL has done it. We're covering the team right now that has done that, and that's just an incredible feat. But the path to get here obviously took an incredible win, 42-36 over the Buffalo Bills. I don't know if they're going to, the emotional high, as Vahe mentioned earlier, got to come down off of that really, really quick here because the Bengals, they look pretty darn good. They went into Tennessee and beat a physical Titans team. And Vahe, before we close this out, how surprised, and we'll go around the horn here, how surprised were you that the Bengals beat the Titans in their home stadium?
Not entirely surprised, and I'm not even sure which the better scenario really was for the Chiefs. I mean, obviously you do want to play at home at Arrowhead if you can, but I think it's a little bit of a 50-50 toss-up on because, I mean, look, the Bengals much later in the season presented different sorts of problems for the Chiefs. The Chiefs, we're a much different team when they played the Titans. The Chiefs were, largely the team we see today when they played the Bengals and lost. Now, there were 17 reasons they lost to the Bengals. A lot of them could have gone the other way, and we can get into that more later this week. But I think that it's a thorny challenge for the Chiefs, to be sure. One thing we got talking about this, I think Sam McDowell, you can clarify this for me again. We were chatting about it. Only the Patriots have beaten Patrick Mahomes twice, period, right? That's it. So Joe Burrow would be trying to be just the second quarterback, second other team that beat Patrick Mahomes more than once.
In the same season, the Titans have beaten him twice.
That's right, in the same season.
In the same season, Tom Brady and the Patriots got them both in 18, and it hasn't. It could have happened twice in 19 with the Texans and Titans then. It obviously could have happened today, and then it could happen next week. But, to Herbie, your question, I mean, I've already said it. The Chiefs have played the toughest team they're going to see this postseason. The Bills are out. The Bengals are a worse team for quite a few reasons. Their defense is considerably worse, even though it's getting better. Their secondary is worse, even though it's getting better. Their offensive line is worse, and it's not getting better. So I don't see how the Chiefs can't get pressure on Joe Burrow. He got sacked 9 times in that game. And that is one place where the Chiefs, we've talked about it all the last half of the season. It's the reason their defense got better is their pass rush got better. So they've got to dominate that game up front if they want to beat Cincinnati.
Lila, you get the last shot there. You get the last thought here. Anything surprising about you from the way the Bengals looked on Saturday?
Honestly, I went into that thinking that the Bengals are going to win. I mean, you look at Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase. I mean, especially Burrow. is just, playing fearless right now. And I think it's really interesting and neat that we get to see. I mean, it was mentioned by Patrick Mahomes today that, Chiefs Bills is going to be, two teams that are going to be playing each other a lot in the future. And I think you can say the same, for the Bengals if they're able to kind of, fix the issues that we talked about and keep going in this trajectory. And to really see in, today's game and then moving forward, kind of the future of quarterbacks in this league, I think is really special. And, Joe Burrow is playing, some great football, even with, how he's, been sacked, is still able to, come up with big plays with the explosiveness that they have. So it'll definitely be fun to see those two quarterbacks going at it.
Yeah, and I think the torch, as Lila mentioned, the torch has effectively been passed on to Patrick Mahomes. The likes of Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, and Joe Burrow now enters that conversation. But we're going to have more on that game later on in the week on the next edition of SportsBeat Live. Look, to all our listeners, watchers, or readers out there, you can read our stuff at kansascity.com. Just take the night and just absorb this epic game that we just watched. I'm sure we were going through emotions in the press box for the Chiefs fans. I know y'all were going through all kinds of emotions. Thankfully, hopefully you didn't break any TVs and throw anything at it. But, the Chiefs came out with the win, and now they will host the Cincinnati Bengals next Sunday. You can find more of us on SportsBeat Live on Thursday at 9:30. After that, you can join us again after the game next Sunday. But that'll do it for now on SportsBeat Live Postgame Edition, brought to you by the University of Kansas Health System. For Vahe, for Sam, for Lila, and for our producer Monty in the back, I'm Herbie, and y'all have a good night.